Saints podcast. I'm delighted to have with me the brilliant Ash Froelich. Ash, me and my wife are big fans of your social media content, and it's very inspirational for us as, people also trying to share the gospel on there. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Let's start with a trend that happened a few months ago. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a phrase, characterizing a phrase of, I'm going to get this wrong because I'm so awkward with current trends. Very demure and mindful.
Mm.
You
Hmm.
recognize that? You heard of this?
Yes.
So this was like I don't know, some TikTok trend that traversed the world, and essentially it was a joke, but it also kind of was discussing a serious point of modesty and the way you think of yourself and presenting yourself in a more demure and mindful way. And what you say anyway, I just wondered, do you think that modesty with these kind of things is coming back into fashion more? What are you seeing?
I do think that modesty is coming back, and I think it is now not necessarily being forced, but now it is being looked at in a different light of something that is like actually being more respected and more like trendy. From what I've seen, I know that at least for what I've seen, modesty, like back in the day, like with culture and things, really just kind of had a bad light. All in all, modesty was all about trying to hide yourself, cover up, and I think now we're getting to a point where we're seeing that like modesty is just more about the type of person you are, the type of respect you have for your body, right? And when you like understand, at least for me, like when I understand truly who I am as a person and as like a spirit and like who I am like in the heart and in the brain and like my soul, I think that really just helps me identify what modesty is to me because I think modesty can be different for others. But I think all in all, like as a culture and stuff, I think modesty is somewhat shifting. And I think it's because our view on ourselves is shifting a lot too.
Can you dig into that a bit more? I'm interested if this is true that it is kind of becoming more of a thing and people are thinking about it more. What kind of things do you think are causing it? Because instantly you think of what's gone on in the last few years in kind of societal movements, and I think Me Too was a massive thing that probably made a lot of people think about. Okay, there's a lot of behaviors going on in the world that are making you. But then also with what you're saying, it seems to be more of a kind of spiritual thing, coming to know yourself more and respecting yourself more. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think for me, from what I've seen, like I'll give the example of like alcohol, for example. I have seen so many people stop drinking alcohol. Alcohol used to be like a really fun thing to do. You'd go out with
That's
your
true.
friends, and you see so many people who have come out on social media being like, guys, I don't drink anymore. It doesn't make me feel good. Like I've realized that I'm a better person without it. And I think the same goes with how we're dressing ourselves, how we're approaching who we are is like those same people who are like, you know what, this actually isn't good for me, are realizing, hey, look, I don't have to like dress a certain way to get other people's approval, like I don't have to do that because like I respect myself enough that like I'm not going to drink alcohol. I'm going to like dress in a way that I feel comfortable. I can be comfortable around my grandma, I can be comfortable around everyone, and that's not saying that the way you dress has, a statement on what other people think about you and their thoughts because I know people feel like with religion modesty is like, oh, men try to control you and stuff. No, I think in this state it's like we're just so confident with ourselves. We have the self-respect that we see that we can be respectful towards other people, towards ourselves, and just, having that self-respect just means that those actions are going to be like taking care of yourself, dressing in a nice way, making everyone feel comfortable, not putting harmful substances in our body, just all of those things. Yeah.
It's such a good point. I've been observing like Gen Z, and I guess I'm technically Gen Z, but I mean
Oh.
like people younger than me, like my younger brother-in-laws and my younger sisters and stuff, and they do seem so level-headed in a way that's really impressive, actually, and in a way that me and my friends maybe I guess weren't as much when we were their age with these kind of things. And I was at an event and speaking to a business owner who runs nightclubs and has done for a long time. And they raised a really interesting point that the business is really struggling because young people are just not bothered about those things as much anymore. And I don't know if, yeah, I don't know if the information that is so readily accessible these days has helped it. But I also saw a survey, and I brought this up to another guest I had on the show, that was very interesting, that Gen Z had said, let me try and get this right. Basically, they've voted for the first time in a while that they were uncomfortable with the amount of inappropriate scenes in movies, and they would much prefer a classical romance story than what we see nowadays, which is kind of these randomly inputted explicit scenes into films. And that was also really interesting. There's kind of a swathe of societal shifts that are moving towards these more kind of self-respect and respect for others, which I think is such a great sign.
Yeah, I do too. I think for me, from what I've seen, I think a lot of this happened also after COVID. I think for some reason that COVID just being forced to do something, and like just all in all, how everything was handled throughout countries and throughout the whole world, I think that really put to light on different things for people. And it really made people question, like, why am I doing this? Like, is this okay? Like, just like asking yourselves the questions you wouldn't be asking if you were not put in hard situations.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a good point. I feel that happened to me too. Kind of a lack of trust in institutions, maybe in thinking like, okay, what do I actually think about this? F- uh,
Yeah.
a brutal opportunity to really think about what your opinions actually are on things.
Mhm.
And tapping into specifically Latter Day Saint culture, because that's something that we share, and much of our audience is Latter Day Saint. You've said recently on social media that you wanted to change Latter Day Saint culture around modesty, and I wonder if you could expand on what you were saying before about what actually is modesty, and what does our Latter Day Saint culture sometimes get wrong about our understanding of modesty.
Yeah. So when I was, let's say I was 12 years old, I was in 6th grade. Modesty was highly forced, especially where I lived. I lived in a really small city, like very small town. And before we got to school, they would make us kneel, and not every day, but it was like the beginning when school started. They would make us like get on our knees, and they would say, if your shorts don't touch your knees, you have to go change. Or like if you'd raise your hands up and your shirt would like show your belly, they're like, you have to go change. You're not being modest. Like that's the school standard. And now
Oh,
I like drive past the school and I see girls wearing whatever they want. And I'm like, wow, that's, so different from when I went. And I think just like reflecting on that really showcases how modesty was taught, right? For me, I was taught like, oh, like if I wear a certain thing, like it's going to make the guys like think this, or like if I wear a certain thing, like it's you're not good. Like in a sense, like they would be like, oh, and make sure you choose friends who dress modestly, or like if your friends aren't doing this, like that. And it was like you were shamed for not dressing a certain way. And it was so funny, like shoulders, like I remember going to school dances and like always making sure I had sleeves or whatever. And there was just, a lot of, I think, judgment because when you're in a small town, you kind of get that, right? And like I said, now I think people are realizing what you wear has very little to do with who you actually are. I think that when you know who you truly are, that you like are legit a daughter of God, like an almighty being, you know, then you really self reflect and be like, wow, like that's actually really cool. And I'm actually really cool, and I have so many awesome gifts and talents. And man, I actually love myself. And that inner love for yourself, which comes from God, really reflects outwardly on what you wear. Because, like, if you really think about it like royalty, right? We're pretty much royalty. And if you really think about that, then what you do reflects that royalty. So like the way I dress, I want to dress in a respectful way. Like I'm an important person. I'm like, I've got so many awesome things about me. Everyone around me has so many awesome things. And so I think that we're just like in a state now that we're just recognizing our worth, right? We're like reflecting and being like, hey, look, like I honestly think that there's nothing wrong with wearing like a sleeveless thing. Like to me, I'm like, that has nothing to do with who she is inside. I mean, if you've gone to the temple, you've taken out your endowments and stuff, then obviously you have a covenant with God to wear garments, and that's different. But with youth and stuff, that makes them no less of a person. I look at my youth and my young women in my ward, and they're amazing. They have the best testimonies. Like, I wish when I was their age, I had that strong of a testimony, and they're not dressing the way we were forced to dress. But they have that self-respect and they have that self-love for themselves. They see who they truly are, which now I feel like people of my age, like the millennials and stuff, are recognizing, like, oh, you know what? Like, yes, it's good to dress in a respectful manner. Yes, it's good not to do these harmful things, but like that doesn't come from fear. We were taught through fear, right? We were taught like, oh, like you're going to get in trouble. Oh, like you're not, that was all fear. And now it's coming out of love. We're doing these things out of love, love for our Heavenly Father, love for Jesus Christ, and love for ourselves.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the ramifications of this kind of higher, more empowering definition of modesty for me. And I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but as I wanted to talk to you about this topic on the podcast, and thought kind of weird because I'm a guy to be talking about modesty. But then as I was kind of understanding your view and a more kind of developed view of modesty, I was thinking, how does that apply to me as a guy? And I was reflecting on those times in my life where I've really like kind of made a daily effort to choose my clothing in a way, and the way I present myself in a way that like speaks to something more than just what's most comfortable, or I don't know, but it was more empowering. And when I thought of it like that, I thought, yeah, there's a principle of not just in my appearance, but modesty across the board in the things that I do and the way I act at work and with friends and everywhere, and just kind of it's the same as using whatever I have and the things that I do in the day to glorify God in the way that I'm doing stuff. And I thought, yeah, this isn't actually just for girls, is it? When we have that proper kind of heavenly view of modesty. What do you think of that? Do you think there's any actual truth in that?
No, there's 100% truth in that, and I love that you, like, self-recognize that because, like I said before, modesty was taught mainly to women, right? Modesty was
Yeah,
mainly
yeah.
girls have to wear a certain thing, and no, modesty is worldwide for literally everyone. It's the way we carry ourselves, it's the way we look at ourselves, the self-respect and love we have for ourselves. And for me, starting off, recognizing modesty was like you had mentioned, like, "Why am I wearing this today? Am I wearing this to, like, be cool, impress people? Or am I wearing it because I'm like having the right gratification towards God and like my body and like who, you know what I mean? So I think everyone across the board, yeah, modesty's for everyone.
So much of your content is about kind of um, how you can still express yourself with your appearance um, while still being able to wear the garment, and also modesty in general. And I'm wondering, is this kind of a principle of the gospel that you just thought, yeah, this is the right thing to do, and this is a space where I can share my thoughts on this? Or was there an experience in your life where you actually gained a real testimony of this and that kind of fueled you on? Like, what gives you the drive to do this?
That's a good question. So I've always loved fashion. I have a love for fashion. I've always loved like clothes. I've loved like the latest trends, and I'm someone who's always had to dress in the latest trends. I've always wanted to fit in. And let's say in June of this year, I actually sold a business, and it was a dress business, and I
Oh,
accidentally got
cool.
put into it. And yeah, the dresses were all like not garment friendly. They weren't necessarily like immodest or anything, but they weren't garment friendly. And I had obviously been to the temple, and it was an eye opener for me to like market these things and like put them on and like showcase them and da da da. I learned after a while, like I felt more comfortable wearing my garments, and like I just could feel a difference. And so I was talking to my husband about this because he was like, "Man, you like now we'll talk about modesty and stuff." And he's like, "When you had like immodest dresses that like obviously endowed Latter-day Saints cannot wear." And he's like, "And now you do this." And he's like, "I'm thinking that it's because you saw the difference and like you felt the difference. I was like, yeah, I just think that like for 3 years, I wasn't always wearing my garments when I would like showcase these dresses or da da da, and then I'd hurry and quickly put them back on, and I could just like feel like the power and like security, and it felt like right to me, right? And so when I sold the business, I saw a huge need in the market for girls who are wearing garments to still dress like in the trendy ways, right? Because everyone wants to fit in, everyone wants to like, dress cute. And to me, because that was so important and I had found a way to do that, I was like, I'm going to share this. And I think what really caught on with my account was that I was not afraid to just straight up be like, this is garment friendly. Like, I think there was always like a little bit of like, don't mention garments, don't do. But on like starting from day one, I was just like, well, this is garment friendly. So like if you wear garments, like this is going to work for you. And showing that like no matter what the trend is, there's always something that we can wear and still keep our covenants, show respect to God, and feel good while wearing them.
Yeah, it's great what you do because I think, for example, when my wife started wearing garments, I think there was almost a slight hint of frustration that she could no longer express herself and like live her faith, and
Yeah.
I think she felt that tension for a while. And I think she's a lot more used to it, and accounts like yours really help. But I think that is a thing of like, now that I have made these covenants, I have to kind of compromise in terms of self-expression. And it's great that you're showing people that actually you still can have that self-expression through appearance, which is really important in our world.
Yeah. I also think, like, I feel like what your wife felt is 100% valid. And I think I've even felt those feelings of the transition, right? And not feeling like you can be like self express yourself, right? With what you wear and be who you are. And I realized that, like, no, understanding who we are is always changing, right? So who I am at 16 was different than who I am now at 29. And I think that what's so cool is when you get your endowments out is like you have altered, like you are becoming someone better, someone newer, like a different person. And I think that if people are struggling with wearing their garments because of that, my suggestion would be to really study God's power, like the priesthood, study the garments itself, and just really study the love that God has for us. Because when I started to do that, and when I started to really look into like, what are these garments about? Like, why are they like this? Why do we force to wear them? Like, then I really was just like, this is just like, honestly, like a gift. It really is just a beautiful gift of protection. And I should feel so grateful that Heavenly Father wants all of us to wear it. Like He wants to protect us, He wants to keep us safe. Like He's our Father. And so when you really like think of those things, I think then your mind will kind of shift and be like, you know what? Yeah, like not wearing a top is totally fine when I get the safety and the protection and the love and just all of that every single day. It's far better.
hmm and I should say here that I agree with you on that, and my wife hopefully isn't annoyed that I've brought that
Yeah.
mentioned her in
No, but
that
you
way on
guys
here.
should know that we all
She,
have felt that way. Like so many
yeah,
people have felt that way. So it's valid.
yeah.
It's like it's a whole new life. It really is. You're having to change completely a whole new thing. So
Part of what we were discussing before this interview, I was kind of like, we were brainstorming, like, oh, how should we frame this? And something she was expressing was how she wishes there was more versatility of necklines, because she likes like a square neck dress sometimes, and she's like, oh, this is such a pain when because it's still like modest what I'm wearing, but I can't,
I
not
still
make.
I still ask myself that all the time. Like I'll put on a dress and it like barely shows and I'm like, it technically would be fine. Like I totally get that. Yeah, it's frustrating sometimes.
Following on from what you're saying in your advice there, what would your advice be to parents listening about? Well, I'm actually, people listening to this will be sick of hearing about this, but I keep saying it. I'm listening extra closely because we're having our first child in March, and we're having a little
Oh,
girl, and so these
oh.
kind of, even though it's far in the future, these things are on my mind about how, as parents, uh, we should teach that. What advice would you give to parents?
I think it starts young. So don't
Right.
think that it's clear out in the future. I even for my kids, my 4 and 7-year-old, I've taught them about modesty. And it's very simple, but I think it starts young and I think it starts in healthy ways of just having respect for their bodies at a young age, and understanding who they are and teaching them like, look, you're like a daughter or a son of God. And this is how we show him that we love him. And the older they get, obviously, you're going to have to teach them how to show more respect to your body, and it kind of, evolves and evolves as they get older. But I just think starting young is the best thing to do, and starting simple because it's so simple, and also teaching with no shame. We don't want to put any fear, any, guilt in modesty because that's not what it is. It's all out of love. It's all out of 100% positivity, right? It's a very positive thing. And so if you are a parent and you're like, I don't know how to teach my daughter because like I don't like what she wears, then shift it a little bit, right? Shift it to like having love for her, who she is. Let her see that you love her for who she is. It starts with that. And then having her see that it's going to shift in her mind and in her soul, She's going to see that and you'll realize that she's going to start to change and do these things and then you can, then when she's like actually sees that self-love, go and be like, hey, like, let's just talk about like maybe we could wear something else, like if it really is bugging you, and be like, like because if we really love who we are in our bodies, like we want to dress in a respectful manner, but that doesn't mean you're any less of a person. It doesn't mean, all these negative things. But I just think for me, I just think starting with love with your children is the most important thing because if they grow up, they feel that love, they know, that they are loved, that they're from God. I think that it's going to really just happen naturally.
Yeah, that's a great point. It reminds me of that kind of old thing of when you're over strict, it can sometimes cause a backlash in the future and cause resentment. And
Yes.
tracing that line, I still remember a family member when when we were younger, and I think they'd had a bit of a dispute about, I don't know, piercings or something. And in the car one day, I remember them saying, "You know what, Dad? If I want a tattoo, I'm gonna get one." And it was just kind of like a rebelling signal
Mhm.
of it, and it was funny. But I guess when you think about it, it's like, okay, um, you don't want to you don't want to make it feel like you have to say stuff like that, and you want to just love. And just, we had a parenting expert on last week on the podcast, and it was really interesting hearing him, and he was saying like you shouldn't really punish your kids in the first several years of their life at all, because the definition of punish is to exact retribution, and that doesn't really sound like something that teaches a child the way they should do stuff, and correct
Mhm.
values and things. It's disciplining is far more complex and positive than that, and it's yeah. So I love hearing advice like that.
Yeah.
And um, what about people? So it would be interesting to get your thoughts on this. The role of church teachers in this. Should they even have a role? Because obviously it's going to come up in classes, in youth classes at church. But what advice would you give to church teachers who are tasked with, I've got to teach these kids about modesty from the handbook or whatever, and that's a really daunting task.
It is. I'm like trying to pull up the For Strength for Youth. I believe the For Strength for Youth now has changed completely from when we went to like the young women, young men's thing.
Oh
Where
yeah,
is
yeah.
it? I believe that it says now that everything is more like to do through prayer and it's more personal, which I think is amazing. I think focusing on that, number one, it's different for everyone, right? What's modest to me might not be modest for my sister. What's modest for me might not be modest to my teacher, but like coming back to the love, just having them realize, like, hey, like you can receive the revelation you need for yourself if you feel good about it and you feel confident and you feel that love from God through what you wear, what you do, how you act, your whole presence, then it's good. And that could be different for everyone. I think that's, and I would just, for the teachers, not teach with guilt and fear. Don't make people feel bad. When I was in Young Women's, they would we had girls camp, and there were a few girls who decided to wear bikinis, right? It was really hot. It's Utah. And they made them go change and put a huge t-shirt over, and they're like, no, that's not being modest. I look back at that, I'm like, that to me was not necessary. Like, it's totally fine. I think they felt confident with who they were. They were just having fun. They were at Young Women's Camp. We should, just celebrate that. And not just like make people feel bad for what they wear. I think we are all smart enough as people that we're going to recognize if something doesn't feel right, and then it's up to us to do the right thing, right? We all have our agency. So, like, if they're feeling like, maybe I shouldn't wear this, then they know. And it's up to them if they want to follow that or if they don't want to. And they're going to learn regardless. They're going to learn, like, oh, hey, like, I actually feel better wearing this, or I don't feel better wearing this. So,
Yeah, this new FSY for the Strength of Youth book was really interesting because I did think it brought some kind of fear. It was quite daunting to open it up, and but at the same time, it's a real opportunity to teach personal revelation and to teach young people to hear the voice of the Lord and learn that early rather than the kind of checklist of, okay, listen to good music, watch good films, dress appropriately, kind of thing.
yes.
Um, and I think that is really powerful. Yeah, we had Brother Wilcox actually on the show to talk about when that was announced, and it was so inspiring that often Latter Day Saints can be the others in a group. I know when I was young, I struggled to connect with a lot of my friendship group because I was brought up in a completely different culture to the traditional British way of growing up, and
Yeah.
in many ways that was because I was kind of, okay, I've got to make sure I stay within all of these different commandments and rules and stuff. Whereas I really love the opportunities that the new For the Strength of Youth manual provides young people. It's a lot more empowering.
Yeah, I just pulled it up and I love that it says the purpose for the strength of youth is not to give you a yes or no about every possible choice you might face. Instead, the Lord is inviting you to live in a higher and holier way, His way. This guide will teach you about His way. And then it goes on, while others can help you, your spiritual growth is personal. It's between you and the Lord. He knows your heart and only He can be the ultimate judge. And I think that's, if I was teaching, I would read directly from the Strength for Youth. Like, it is between you and the Lord, and the only person who should be judging your actions is the Lord. So,
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And in fact, another current kind of recent innovation is, what do you think about the new garments that have been released in hot
mm,
countries? There's been a bit of a hoo ha about these,
there
haven't there?
has, yeah. I'm actually really happy. I think it's awesome. I think it's really needed, especially for really hot weather times. And even, I mean, I know it's getting released to different countries first, but even in like Arizona, St. George, like in Utah and other states, it gets really hot. And I think it's the church evolving and seeing that, things can change, and I do think they're seeing that modesty was once taught by covering, and they're realizing, hey, like, it isn't like that. It is more deep than what we did put on, before. And I think, I've had a few older women reach out to me with, being upset because they're like, my whole life I covered my shoulders. And now, like, for the first time, I'm 60 years old and I can finally not cover my shoulders. And I'm like, wow, like that's got to be crazy. But, if you are having problems with it, or, I would highly just pray about it and know that, like, this is a good thing, right? Like, we don't want to be dying of heat in the hot weather, and the church has seen the complaints, right? They listen, and I think it's a great thing. Honestly, I'm excited. I think when I'm out doing gardening work in 100 degrees weather, I'm like, sweet, I'm glad there's something I can wear.
Yeah, definitely. There is this the we had a I can't remember what calling he had at the moment, but he was visiting our stake and did a kind of young adult thing with us. And a point I really was impressed by was when he related testimonies to Jenga towers,
Mm.
and he was like, if if something like the removal of sleeves from garments is the Jenga brick that makes the thing fall down, that's not really good, is it? What is your testimony built on? And I think
Yeah.
adapting to things like these, as things naturally do evolve and policies change and stuff, it is healthy to be able to step back and emotionally detach from like, oh man, this means the church isn't true because it's changing stuff, and this is worthiness is dependent on sleeves and and things. Then
Mhm.
that's
I think it's
healthy.
kind of like in the Bible, right? When Jesus Christ came and he was like, "Yo, you guys are living the law of Moses. Like you're trying to like do every little nitpick thing like a certain single way." And he's like, "That's not it. Love your neighbors, love your enemies. Let's be good people, you know?" Like I think he really came in there and was like, "No." And I think he's probably going to come back and say the same thing like, "Hey guys, it's love, you know? Love your neighbors, love your enemies. Let's be good people, you know?" I think we, as spirits, our spirits can feel the right and they can come back to like really like sinking into who we truly are. And I think that knowledge will always be with us. Even if we choose to do bad things, it's always going to come back. And so I think for us, the goal is to try to sync our bodies with our spirits so that we gain the knowledge back that we once had before. Because I truly think it was so simple and so beautiful, right? It made us all come here in the first place. And so I think for me, I have to constantly like take myself back, like, okay, simple, it's love. Everything about the gospel, everything about what we do and who we are, it's all love. That is the main number one thing, you know? And so when I stem everything on the love that I have for Christ and for God, everything is just going to fall into place. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that I won't have questions, I won't have concerns. It doesn't mean bad things are not going to happen or whatever. But it just means that that's going to keep me grounded. If I have love for God, I'm invincible. I'm going to do whatever I can, however I can, And so,
Definitely. I think you put it perfectly in a quote that you shared on social media. I think it was you. It must have been you, where you
hopefully.
said, "It's not about covering up; it's about revealing who you really are." And
Mhm.
I just thought that was such an excellent point. So thank you for that. Um,
Yes.
Now your profile and your content has become so popular over the last kind of year or so, and I just it made me interested in like what was your journey to content creation, and why do you think your content has resonated so much with people?
Oh, so I actually started in July. I started the end of July. I was actually in Vietnam and I was starting to post like outfits for garments, right, that were shorts, and it honestly took off. I still am not 100% sure, but I do think number one, I think I was just really specific with who I was targeting as an audience. Like by putting modest, garment friendly outfits, the modest and garment friendly girls came to my page because they're like, oh, like she just straight up says it. And I think that's how, and I think also with social media, a very important thing is to talk about who you are and to tell a story. People love stories, people love connecting. And with something, I knew that like modesty wasn't going to necessarily connect people with who I was. And so I decided to kind of share my backstory, who I was, where I came from, you know, hard situations that I feel like I've been through and so many other people have been through, but sharing it in a simple and loving way that shows no judgment towards either side, and just having a place where people can feel heard and seen no matter what their religion is, who they are, and just understanding that in the end of everything, that God loves you and hopefully you can see that, and so I think having the super niched down modesty while connecting people in an emotional way with who I am as a person was really what took off.
Because you post obviously you post the kind of advice for different outfits and inspiration for fashion, but then you have some really interesting takes on kind of wider things in the gospel too that I think are really
Mhm.
interesting to see. And I mean, what would your advice be for people who want to share their testimony more openly on social media? Because it is kind of I know I found it a challenge first when I started this podcast. I was kind of like, what are people going to think of me? I live in a place where I was the only church member in my whole school, and and college
Wow,
and
yeah.
stuff, and so kind of speaking openly was quite daunting. I didn't know what
Oh,
people would
yeah,
think.
for you
Um,
especially, for sure. Yeah, being in Utah, I'm surrounded by members, so it's a little different, obviously. But I would say just do it. Honestly, before I post, like, my testimonies online, sometimes modesty posts, but kind of depends. I will say a prayer before I post to, like, make sure that, like, this is good. This is, like, gonna help people, and it keeps me aligned with why I do it. And just knowing that, like, you will most likely 100% get some mean comments, you will get some hate, but that the outcome of you sharing good is far better than that, you know? And just doing it. Honestly, I'm a person who just does things. I believe that you just gotta do it, you know? Um, just share it because no one has the same story as you. No one has your exact same testimony. No one has what you've been through. And I wish that everyone around me would share, you know, their background, their childhood, their hard times, because I think we would look a lot at people differently. We wouldn't be judging. We wouldn't be like, oh, why are they doing that? You know, oh, I heard that Susan's doing this, you know. We would be so much more compassionate and we'd be filled with so much more love if everyone was sharing, you know, what I'm sharing. They're sharing who they are and where they come from and what makes them them. And they're sharing how the gospel has helped them. I think that would be amazing. I wish everyone would. So,
yeah, that it would be nice if more. But I know this is something that the church really wants, especially with recent things like the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and Heretic, and there's so much attention on Latter Day Saints specifically that the church is desperate for the members to kind of be ambassadors and share their light on social media, and it's such an effective thing to do. And it's trying to encourage people listening to this. It's like as you say, share your story on social media. We all want to hear it, and it really does make a difference. It's so powerful. I think in the UK something like 50% of the conversions happening, and there's a lot of conversions happening, 50% are coming from social media now, which is
wow,
just
that is
crazy. Yeah.
huge.
Yeah, and it's like we don't just want. Obviously, it's great to have the missionaries doing their little TikTok dances and whatever they're doing on social media, but like we want the actual members in these places to share their
Yes.
stories. And I mean, if they can do it to the quality that you do it as well, that's a great bonus. But
No, I think
yeah,
honestly just sharing is amazing. You know, actually, a few weeks ago, I had this woman reach out to me and she lived in South Africa of all places. And she was like, I, for some reason, started watching your videos. And she was like, I need to know like where your church is. Cause like I resonate with you so much. Like I've been through a
wow.
lot of hard things in my life. And I had sent her the church information in Africa. Anyway, she ended up going to church. She ended up like finding missionaries there. I haven't spoke to her since, but I was like, wow, that is so crazy that I like my influence has reached that far because I feel like I'm just in Utah. It's like a bubble. Everyone's Mormon, everyone's LDS, you know, and it was just so cool to have her reach out, help her, send her to the church because she really felt like it would help her life. And like that is what I want people to see is like lives are hard. You're not going to get an easy life. No one has an easy life, you know, but this is what's going to make it easier and better for you to like get through those hard things, you know. And so it was so cool that she reached out and was like, wow, so cool that she could go to church. So,
That is really cool. I know even like I know that my sisters follow your stuff in England, and I really do think you're having such a cool impact across the world for Latter Day Saints, and obviously people who aren't of our faith as well. Because some of your posts have had an incredible reach. I was obviously
mhm.
looking through in preparation for this, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's so cool to see. I actually have a you've just reminded me of a funny story of when I was on my mission and my companion and I were really ill. So we
Uh,
had to stay in the house and we thought, well, what's something we can do to kind of keep things going while we're housebound? And we had WeChat on our on our
oh,
phone, and WeChat is kind of this. It's like I guess it's like WhatsApp, but
yeah, it's like
purely
WhatsApp. Mm.
Chinese. Yeah, and they have a they have a feature on there called Message in a Bottle,
Mm.
where you can send kind of a message to anyone in the world, and it's just like you get connected with a completely random stranger who also has kind of pressed that button on the app too. And we connected with this Asian lady in Texas, and
Oh,
she had seen from our profile picture like, "Oh, are you both missionaries?" And bearing in mind, there are millions, maybe even like a billion of people on this app or whatever.
yeah.
And we were like, yeah, yeah. And she said, oh, I went to church once in Asia, but now I'm in Texas. I didn't. And anyway, come to like a couple weeks later, 3 weeks later, after kind of teaching her over WeChat, she sent us a picture of her at the church in Texas, and she had been
Wow.
passed on to the missionaries there. And we continued to kind of assist her with these missionaries, and she got baptized in Texas from
Holy
that Mexican
cow.
bottle in Texas. I just thought that was
That is
really cool.
so cool. Like, what are the odds?
I know,
That's
what are the odds?
awesome.
I love that story,
Wow.
but
That is
I
so
completely
cool.
forgot about that. But you've reminded me, so thank you for
Yeah,
that.
exactly, like, no effort is wasted. You learn that as a missionary, and that's why I think if you're gonna share, no effort is wasted. Literally, and I think with social media, we kind of have a skewed like vision on like what really is reality, but like people are getting discouraged if they have like only 200 views. And to me, it's like if you had 200 people in a room and you're talking to them,
Mm.
that's a lot of people. Like imagine, and so like don't get discouraged on all of those things. Like just do it. Like God knows your heart and your intentions. And even like that story is so awesome. Like no effort is ever going to be wasted when it's having to do with God and preaching for good. It never will be. Like you never know who you're going to inspire.
That is so true. I mean, I consult on a lot of podcasts, and they'll always be like, I'm really annoyed with the views that I'm getting. And it's some like really random niche podcast that's getting 200 views, as you say. And I'm saying, that's brilliant. You're joking. Like, you're trying to be Joe Rogan, but you're reaching the audience, the really specific audience that you want. And the podcast that I work on mainly, we sold out the London Apollo the other week, which was
Oh,
just insane experience.
wow.
And
Yes.
that's 3,500 people. And we were all sitting backstage thinking like, if we got 3,500 views on a video, we'd thought we've done a terrible job. And it was like an utter
Yeah.
failure. And then you see 3,500 people who are interested in the show there in person, and it's an otherworldly experience. So the
Exactly.
the
Yes.
impact that you can have by sharing your story is just it's just incredible. But there is another side of that which you alluded to, which is the kind of criticism that you get. And I wonder kind of what level of backlash have you gotten from some of the stuff you're doing, and how do you deal with that? Because I know it can be kind of tough at times too.
You know, I think that growing up in a tough childhood made me a little bit more resilient to things like this. So it doesn't really affect me, honestly. And I've received hate. I get
Right.
messages all the time. People will comment mean things, and I know other creators who will just like delete it or like I think you can filter out a word so they can't comment it, but I just leave it. I'm like, whatever, let them say what they want. Um, I personally just to me, I look at it more as just like my content is triggering to them because they clearly have had some sort of situation with this. And I try to kind of like give them the benefit of the doubt, honestly. Sometimes it is hard. Like if I share something about my childhood, that's been hard for me to share. And then I get someone like invalidating that. It could be really hard. I kind of have to step back, get off social media, say a prayer, pray for charity, pray for love towards that person and just give myself a break because obviously I'm a person and I get my feelings hurt. But I will say that, I get maybe like 3% hate. I think that
Oh,
people
really?
are so nice to me. And, recently I get so many messages from non members, like people who are not even LDS, and they're just like, your content is so nice. Like, I don't even go to church, but like, you're just sharing such nice stuff. And I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Like, which is what I want. I really want to like get to those people who are not even of LDS faith so that they can
Of course.
hear
Yeah.
it. But I was at a party the other day invited for like businesses and some random girl, I have no idea who she was. She came up to me and she's like, I follow your content. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Like, so you're LDS? And she's like, no, like I left the church like 5 years ago. I actually don't even like the church. But she's like, I for some reason get so attached to your content. She's like, I watch your videos and I just have to listen to the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, well, that's really good to know. And I love that because it's even like for me, I just think if you share things out of love, even though they are really controversial, even though not everyone agrees, I think that they can still find your content good and still listen to it. And it kind of like opens it back up a little bit, right? Like the fact that non-members will message me and be like, "I love your content." I'm just like, yeah, that's just like opening up just a little bit more, so that when it is their time, maybe they'll come back, and I'm not going to judge them for leaving or for not going back, whatever. I think everyone has to go on a journey for themselves, and when Christ comes back, they're going to know. So I'm just like, you know what? My job for who I am is just to open the doors, be kind, show love, and let God handle the rest. I'm doing what I can, and some people will send hate, and that's okay. You can delete it, you can block it, you can do whatever you need to come back in a healthy way, and handle those emotions healthily. But I think just focus on the impact that you will make, is the most important thing. So,
What kind of response did you get when you were opening up, which was really cool to see and courageous, when you were opening up about the faith crisis that you've had
mm, I
in
had a
not
lot of
even
people message me actually saying the
right.
same thing. And Um, I got a lot of people asking me like what I did, how I got over it. And I'll give them a good brief response of just like, hey, like I think that it's for me personally, I think it's healthy to have questions. I really do. Joseph Smith, that's how the whole church got restored, a question. I think it's good to have questions. I think it's good to look and really be like, hey, is this like really, what I think it is? And then to look into healthy ways to find those answers, praying, talking to sources like people you trust, like family, friends. Um, and all in all, I think what's helped me the most with having questions, having kind of a faith crisis, was understanding that this gospel is just imperfect people. Like it really is. Like the gospel of Jesus Christ is true and 100% perfect, but it's being ran by imperfect people. So, history, like if you have problems with history and Joseph Smith and all of that, they were imperfect people. Joseph Smith, not perfect. Like he was awesome and he restored the gospel and we're so grateful for him, but he's not perfect. All of these prophets and apostles, not perfect. They are amazing men who do amazing things. Don't get me wrong, but they're not perfect. So don't get so hung up on all of these things. Like the policies are changing, things are always evolving. If you're upset about that, just know that like this is just a sign that those leaders are trying to hear you. They're trying to hear your complaints. They're trying to like understand who you are. And once again, it's all just imperfect people. I see so many complaints about people leaving and like why, and all in all it has to do with the people. It's just humans. And I think that if people were just to like kind of let it go and just be like, you know what, yeah, like I'm probably not going to get all the answers I want the way I want. I'd love to know a lot of things that I don't, and that's okay because in the end, what really matters is your relationship with Christ and the fact that our whole purpose here is to go back home. We want to go back home. We want to live back with God. And so let's not get so hung up on what other people are doing wrong or right, past or present. Let's not get hung up on what Joseph Smith did, what all those people did, because of course they made mistakes. And, if I was one of them and I had a journal and people were reading it and just nitpicking all the things like, oh, they did this wrong, they did this wrong. So I guess that's not true. I'd feel so bad. I'd be like, please do not base your like faith and your love for God on my mistakes. Like that is not okay. And I think that's what people do is just because they are highly praised men, it's just like, but they did this wrong. So it means it's not true. It's like, no, just because I went and yelled at my kids, I feel terrible. I'm going to go apologize, but like I did that. It's wrong. And, that doesn't mean that my faith and my love for God like is any worse or bad, like that's not going to change someone else's testimony. So don't let other people's mistakes change your testimony. You don't want that to happen. Focus on you, focus on God, focus on getting back, focus on loving people. Because I think that's really so cool to see is why Christ came back and was like, love your enemies, love everyone. Because he knows, like, we're all just imperfect people trying to do the best we can to get back home. And so faith crisis is hard. I've been there, I've done that. And I think it's really hard when people just tell you to pray about it and just to read your scriptures when I know that's what they're doing. I do know that because I felt the exact same way, and I know that can be really invalidating. And so for me, I think just kind of narrowing down what is it truly that you're super upset about, you know? Like what is it? Is it something that God that is changing your relationship with God? Like is someone else's actions, doing that? No. So let it go. Control what you can control. And if you can't control it, let it go. God's going to come back. Christ is going to come back. They're going to explain. You're going to be fine. I think just having faith, for me, I've looked at it as it takes the same amount of faith to believe in God as it does to not believe in God. Either way, you're believing to not believe in something and you're believing to believe in something. And for me, it's easier for me to believe in God because it's so good. It like makes sense. Why would I not believe in something that could help me, instead of believing in nothing? And so it's their choice. It just takes the same amount of faith. So just like figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's so easy when someone close to you comes to you with a faith crisis, with things like church history, to get defensive instead of, you know, stopping and having some poise and helping them get to the root of the issue and helping them connect with God and feel His love. It's very easy to kind of be like, no, actually, I read this thing that contradicts what you believe, And
Yeah. There's no point in arguing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there really isn't, at least for me. I mean, and I'm not like a scriptorian or anything, so I truly don't know scriptures that well to even argue in the first case. But man, if I was like in prison and someone came to me and was like, "Well, because you stole and you're in prison now, I'm not going to believe in God." Like how
Mm.
ridiculous. Like truly. And that's what we're doing is we're being like, "Oh, well, because Joseph Smith made these mistakes or he did this or, I'm not going to believe." And it's like, man, you're putting your faith in the wrong person. Because, like, first of all, don't judge. Let God do that. Just focus on you and your relationship with God. And that has helped me a ton because I have had so many questions and concerns about history, policies. And at the end of the day, I am gonna control what I can control. If I can't, I'm gonna let it go and I'm gonna just do what I know to be true. So.
I think those who know your journey and your story as well would say it was admirable that you have remained in the church despite not only, having issues with things like that, but things very personal to you and your challenging upbringing, things like that. And I just wonder what aspects of the gospel have caused you to stay despite those things, those challenging times.
Mm. Yeah, so I honestly think that for me, it was almost like I grew up with Heavenly Father almost like being my one source of a parent. Like I did not grow up in a healthy environment at home. I did not have parents who I could trust and talk to, but I did have God. And I do think that is why I have been so resilient in staying in this religion because I just always like we just had each other's backs, it seemed like no matter what I did, I knew I could go to God at the end of the day and tell him about my day, and at the end of the day he would bless me even if I made mistakes. And it didn't mean that they like were immediate blessings, but I just also saw so many miracles in my life that I just could never deny it. I don't know. It's so interesting because I do have a lot of people who message me saying like, "Oh, I grew up in like a really unhealthy home too. Like they were also LDS, like, but I've left because like that's just not fair and like that's not how members should be treated and da da da." I get that. Like I'm I would never judge them for leaving because I understand how incredibly hard it is to like stay in a religion where you were abused by people misusing that religion for so long. Um, but once again, to me, it was just like what I knew to be true. And for my life, I knew that God would never leave me and God was the only one there for me at the end of the day. And so my loyalty lied to him always and it always will be. And I've just seen so many blessings from God and from Christ. And I've seen the atonement work, changing who I am, my thoughts, my behavior, because growing up in a very traumatic situation, it alters your brain. It changes the way you do things. It changes the way you think, you know? And I know that I would not be the person that I am today, who is, you know, at a pretty healthy spot. I'm mentally aware of things, you know, without the atonement. I think it has totally helped me, rewired my brain, helped me really heal, and I owe that all to God. And I'm just, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be the same without him. So
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you being so open about your journey. I'm sure it was difficult at times to share that and open up, but um, it's helped so many of us kind of uh, not even dealing with the challenges that you have, but just applying that to different things. And yeah, I just appreciate the things that you put out on social media. I think you're just a great voice on there. So thank you for putting your neck out there, as we would say in the UK. I don't know if
thank
that's an expression in America, um, but it really is valuable, and you're having such a great impact. And this has been so valuable, and I appreciate your time. And I was thinking I should ask you this as a
you.
final question, which is,
Yeah.
what are three modest fashion essentials every woman should have in her wardrobe?
Mm, that's a good question. Okay, so number one is this brand called Half Tees. They're literally almost like a crop top, but they are half tees. So, like, no matter what you wear, it always covers your garments and it's not a full shirt. So, you're not like dying of heat. It's just literally like almost like a crop top. So, half tees are amazing. They have long sleeves, short sleeves. You should look up the brand. It's literally Half Tees. And then I would say, hmm, I don't know. That's really hard. I'm trying to think, because I know that is one that I would, like, die on the hill for. Um, I would say basics. Honestly, just a good pair of basics, because when I look at, like, trending fashion that sometimes I can't wear, I take that and just see the basics of what it is. So like a good pair of like pants that are just like 100% like you could wear, because then you can always like add accessories to and make it look cute, instead of like, I think people's base layers are where people get stuck of like, oh, the skirt is too short or your shorts are too short. So like finding the base layers that are cute and then just accessorizing and making them look trendy. That's kind of how I've done it, because yeah, I don't know, but that's what I'd say.
No, that's great. That's very helpful. Thank you. I know my wife came to me one day when we were shopping for a holiday that we were going on in a warm place, and
Mm,
she had brought to me this page on an online shop with a swimming costume that she said that you had recommended, and she was so grateful for that because she had kind of always felt uncomfortable in the past with like, oh, I don't know what to do about that arena. So I know she has really been impacted by your stuff with just random things like that have helped
thank
her
you.
kind of deal with stuff like that. So yes, lots of things that aren't necessarily as um, linked to me and what I would look at, but she's been really helped by. So thank you for that, and
No, of
thank you
course.
for sharing your time with us today. It's been really
Thank
fun
you.
and really valuable.
It's been so good to get to know you and be on here. Thank you so much.
Yes, and everyone go and follow Ash. I'll put her um, stuff in the description where you can follow her. But yeah, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks for watching For All the Saints. This show needs your help to grow. Please like the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you think would enjoy it. Thank you.